Okay, new experiment today. I'm going to talk about sort of some of the things that are going on in the world, although I'm not going to reference them necessarily directly, just to show you the flat world. So this is sort of like how to tell that someone's stuck in a flat world. So I'm going to give you a bunch of tips and tricks. I'm going to show you how big the world really is and how to recognize this. So watch till the end. So yeah, these flat world tells show up a lot with relativism, right? And this relativism is the idea that a bunch of things are equal, right? In that they're just relative to one another. Well, things that are relative to one another can't really be hierarchical. I mean, hierarchy has relativity in it, but it also has a sense of this is here and this is underneath it, right? Or this is here and this is above it, or this is here and this is equal to it, right? And that actually helps a lot. But in a flat world, you take out the hierarchy and really everything's kind of on the same line and everything's equal, but everything's now competing or in opposition, right? To reduce the hierarchy is to increase opposition. It's to set things against one another because you have less room to put them in. If you can't stack them up, you have to put them all on the same level. It's technically what's happening. Now, I want to show you, because it's a little abstract, obviously, right? I had to sort of start at the top. I apologize, right? I'm going to show you how this manifests. So in this, relativism world where things are equal, expressing your opinions about a topic is no different from, editing the representation of a truth, audio or video, to make a seemingly independent representation of something different than what actually happened, right? In other words, an AI video of, someone dancing with a monkey is not real. Presenting that as real is a problem, but we don't really understand how big of a problem. So let me break this down a little bit further for you. So let's say I say something like, I feel the president makes bad decisions or made a bad decision about H-1B visas. Okay? Now, you may think, oh, Mark just expressed his opinion. No, I didn't. The funny part. What word did I use? Feel. Right? Now, you can say a feeling is an opinion. I don't think a feeling is an opinion. I think a feeling is a feeling, and that's why we have a word feeling and a word opinion, and they're not the same word. That may sound simplistic, but that's actually really important. This is part of the flat world. When you think opinions and feelings are the same, you're wrong because you're not accounting for the fact that they're different words that point to different concepts ultimately. Maybe there's some overlap, or maybe you can overlap them, but you shouldn't, right? Because they're not equal. That's the flat world. Now, let me dig a little bit deeper on this. Let's say that I say something like, oh, Trump talks about H-1B visas, and that's wrong. That is an opinion, right? I'm the one making the claim about Trump for sure, right? But I'm the one making the claim. Okay? That's not a feeling, right? I'm making a definite claim outside of my feelings, which is why I didn't use the word feeling, and that would qualify as an opinion. Now, it may be purely informed by my feelings, but you can't really tell. They didn't give you enough information. And that's the other way in which we flatten the world. We fill in all this information that's missing for no apparent reason. Now, I try to avoid this. This is why I often ask questions that seem really basic and simple, because I don't know where people are at. But I want to know where people are at so that I can understand what they're saying. A lot of people don't do that work. They don't put it in. People get very upset at me, by the way, for asking what I call easy questions, right? That happens all the time. People get very upset. Like, why? I'm not where you're at, and I'm just trying to find out where you're at. Really important. when you don't do that, you do fill it in, right? Now, you get something different, like, oh, president reversed his position from January on the H-1B visa issue. Okay, that's better. Hopefully I provide evidence for this, like, oh, he said this and now he's saying this. At least there's now evidence, right? That's different from just expressing your opinion, because you're expressing your opinion plus evidence, hence the plus evidence. Now, whether or not that evidence is correct or you've drawn the correct conclusions from that evidence is still up in the air. See how deep this goes? We haven't even scratched the surface here. There is a lot of difference between those things. Everyone tends to collapse them into one thing. That's the problem. And if you agree with the I feel the president makes bad decisions, that to you is the same as me providing evidence in your head. Psychologically, this has been measured. There are whole white papers on this. There's whole experiments done about this. I'm not making this up. This is in the literature. If you bother to read it, most people don't. I get that. And the people that do won't talk about it sometimes, which really frustrates me, right? But I'll talk about it here. That's what this channel is for, among other things. These are all different things. And notice the level of detail is changing, the amount of detail changing, but also the nature of the claims has changed. If I make a statement about my feelings, it's not necessarily a claim. It's just a statement about my feelings, a description of how I feel. If I have an opinion, that's a claim. But it's a claim that is unique to me. Now, I may not be the only one that has that opinion, but when I state the opinion, it's my opinion. It's clearly my opinion, right? It may or may not be true, by the way. Like, this is all about, like, this is just a single person perspective. Wait, we're gonna get busy with this. This is nothing. Take notes if you have to, right? So the details changed. The nature of the information has changed. The framing of the information has changed. All of these things are now different in each of these examples. How much different did you feel as I'm going through these examples? That's the core problem. We're not, quote, objectively, if there is such a thing, analyzing things. We're not. We're not paying attention to the words that are being used. We're paying attention to our own emotional valence, how we feel about what we heard, rather than paying attention to the words that were used. It can be very informative. It can also be, trick you, but it can be very informative. Now, we can go further. Right? I can draw conclusions with or without evidence, so it's important to still pay attention to that variable because it might change, right? And those are very different. But no one notices these differences anymore. I can say, well, because the H-1B visa opinion has changed, clearly Elon Musk had some influence on this decision. That's a conclusion. I might even have evidence for it. That evidence might be completely made up. It might have been made up by somebody else and I bought into it. And now I'm just repeating it because I have it. It happens all the time now with all kinds of things. So Tim Poole talked about this years ago in 2019 and 2020, I think. He called it cytogenesis, where the citation is made from, back then it was a lesser journalistic thing online, and then the New York Times would pick it up and they'd say, according to, online site blah, this person did this, right? And then somebody else would pick up the New York Times story and write a story on that, and they'd cite the same thing. And then the original source would say, oh, we got that wrong. But they never unwind the stories. And Tim Poole used to talk about this all the time, actually. All the time. I was listening to him back then quite a bit. He's not wrong. So we already have this weird problem where people make claims, they're false. They make claims without evidence, or they make up evidence. And then other people pick up those claims and repeat them in a pattern, right? Because they want views and eyes and they want to cover this stuff too, right? And of course, journalism already fell. That's the fall of the fourth estate. can see my video on that here, right? It already happened. And of course, obviously it happened in the UK too, in the mid 90s, by the way, or thereabouts, very clearly now that's come out in the news. So this is a real problem, but that's not even the problem. That's just the single person perspective on what I'm talking about. The problem of the flat world goes deeper, my friends, much deeper. Because, well, guess what? The world is deeper. It's way deeper. So we have a hard time thinking about this properly because we're so used to thinking about things on our own by ourselves. We're not used to being in a cooperative environment where we're distributing our cognition among many people and trying to understand a complex issue. We're not doing that anymore. So here's my example. Suppose I say so-and-so hates immigrants, right? Now, I've made a claim about another person and their internal state. And in this case, again, without evidence. Did you notice that? Without any evidence, right? And in this case, likely without the possibility of evidence, right? Because you can't tell what somebody believes by what they say, because people lie. People often don't know what they believe, and so they're not necessarily lying with malicious intent, we'll say, or any intent at all. They're just parroting something that they think they should believe. Oh, yeah, a lot of people do that. You probably do that about some things too. The way you would have evidence for someone's belief, I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan, as you may have noticed. I only mention him all the time, for example. You'd have to point to a pattern of behavior, not just a single incidence of behavior, that would back that up, because I think you believe what you act out in the world. And what you act out in the world, roughly speaking, from the perspective of someone who isn't you, is a behavior. What you act out in the world to you is an action, by the way. Notice that there's differences between those two things, mainly the perspective, which is very important because we're not taking that into account in the flat world. With our relativism, we think our perspective and everybody else's perspective are the same. And it may be that somebody else has a better perspective than we do, and maybe we shouldn't judge them. Oh, maybe. Maybe the president knows something about H-1B visas and letting them in that we don't. And if you want to know more about that, I actually do have a video on that. And I will link it here because I think it's important. There's lots of ways to think about an issue like that that people don't ever consider. So you could go another step further and you could say this person said, quote, and then whatever the quote is, like, I don't like people who came here and are, think they're entitled to stuff, right? Or are getting stuff, or taking advantage of free gifts, right? And maybe they said that. Maybe they didn't say that. Like, maybe that's a made up quote, right? Because right now, I've got news for you. Most quotes are made up by far. Like, this has been studied, right? This is the outgrowth of having too many so-called journalists and zero standards for journalism. And then people wonder, well, why is there a trust crisis? Well, you don't have standards. You're not following principles. That's why. It's not that hard. You get a bunch of unprincipled people, maybe people who are incapable of having principles, because that's possible, right? I'm just going to tell you that's definitely some people. I don't know how many. I don't care. You have to account for it, though, once you know it exists. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem, right? And the thing is, that's just scratching the surface. What many people do not know at all is the claims that you make are one thing, but making claims about other people independent of, we'll say, your voice or yourself is another thing entirely. That may sound a little weird, right? But yeah, things get deep here. So let's suppose you provide something that isn't from your mouth or from your writing or whatever, or from you at all. But you don't tell them it is from you. So for example, I could take someone's words, rewrite them, make them a quote, right? Put them in a tweet. Let's say, so-and-so believes this, and quote them, having rearranged the words and putting it in a tweet. Now I'm misrepresenting somebody else using something that looks independent from them and from me. Or maybe somebody else did that and I just reposted it. So now I'm not the authority here. I'm not making the claim. This claim is from a picture that looks like it's from the person. And that happens. Like, we've already caught people doing that on Twitter and on Facebook and on the other platforms. This is happening, right? And what happens if there's multiple people involved in this? Again, like, one example is, oh, I saw this online. It looked real to me. I retweeted it. But what if you're, like, I don't know, you're a news organization. Just pick a random news organization for absolutely no reason other than it's like going through this right now, called the BBC. Let's suppose that you edited a video and moved terms and phrases around in time in the video. Like, just lifted whole phrases from the beginning of the video and put them at the end of the video, right? And cut that together, which involves a conspiracy, right? It involves a bunch of people cooperating, knowing what they're doing. Like, the guy clipping the audio and moving it knows what he's doing and knows that it isn't representative of what happened, because in order to present a video, you just present the video. You don't need to edit a video to present it, right? Now, there are valid ways of editing a video that don't move things in the video. So, for example, this video and many of my videos, my editor now, my new editor, often cuts pieces out where I pause. So you're not going to see those. They're not here. It doesn't move anything around. Just take words that I said in the beginning and put them with words I said later on in the video. That doesn't happen. So, you could say editing a video is a valid thing to do. Well, not all types of editing are valid. That's the problem. You don't know what editing they did to that video. So now they're presenting a video. Someone told them to edit the video that way, probably, right? And then somebody else handed that video off. Now, again, if you watch my Follow the Fourth Estate video, I go through how this already happened once, right? You've got a presenter. He's being given information from a producer, and that producer is getting information from yet another source. Now, in that case, the source lied. The experts the producer had look at it said, no, this is not real. Don't believe this source. They put it on anyway. The presenter had no knowledge of this. How would they know that? If they could know that, why have a producer? You wouldn't need one. Right. Okay. Right. And in fact, you wouldn't need the source either. Because the only way you would know that is if you got the information yourself, which you didn't do. Because that's just not possible for most things. In fact, almost all the things in the world, that's not possible for. I can't get you information from Ukraine. I've never been, and I'm probably never going to go. I can't get you any information from Ukraine. I can't do it. Or Gaza, or Italy, or France, where there's riots, or the BBC, where it turns out they've been lying to everybody and editing things and, creating fraudulent documents to manipulate stories since the 90s. And they've admitted it multiple times to multiple people. And no one's still in jail, which is just freaking amazing. But in the flat world, this is reported, as it was to me initially, as a misquote. Oh, they misquoted Trump. Oh, okay. Well, they misquoted Trump. Well, they misquote people all the time. People should be prepared for it. They didn't misquote Trump. They edited a video and presented it as an actual, accurate, precise representation of what happened as a contiguous thing with no interruption and no breaks, presenting it as though it was a real-world event when they knew it wasn't a real-world event, when they knew those were not the words that were used in the order that they were said in the video. They knew this, and they're completely unapologetic about it. And their attitude is, why should we even pay for doing this? You should be in prison. Are you kidding me? Why would this even be a question in the mind of any other human being? This is amazing, because we're living in a flat world. And the crime of misquoting somebody is the same as the crime of editing a video to completely misrepresent reality. Those are two different things. And the way that they're different, the reason why they're not the same level of crime, is because it's easy to misquote somebody. Anyone can do that by themselves, by accident, simply through poor memory or poor transcription. Like, this is an easy error for a single person to make by themselves. You know what you can't do by yourself as an error or a mistake? Is edit a video in that way. It's not possible. In fact, it's hard for one person to even do. So, it's not the same level of crime because there's a different level of effort. There's a different level of coordination. There's a different level of thought and cooperation and planning going on. And in this case, in the case of BBC, we know that because we have the emails about them planning this out and coordinating it and thinking about, well, which words should go where to make this look the way we want it to look. That's not the same as misquoting somebody. There's a different level of effort. Misquoting takes no effort. It takes a simple error. This takes something a lot more and involves a lot more people. And when you involve a lot more people, somebody should have not let that happen. Actually, none of the people involved should have let that happen. That's a systemic corruption. That doesn't mean you can bring the system down. You still need that system to accurately report. You just need to remove the corrupt people, because this is where corruption comes from. Systems aren't corrupt. Some systems work and some systems don't, for sure. Systems will fail on their own merit, though. That's pretty easy. And some systems require extraordinary individuals in the right place, for sure. That doesn't make them bad systems, by the way. It just means they have a high cost of very talented people required to be involved in those systems in the right place. Different problem, important problem. Maybe these are the problems we should be talking about. But first, we could do the easy thing. The easy thing is, that's corruption. Those people are corrupt. They need to go. It's that simple. They can't be involved in any system. Like, actually, right? Like, exclude them from all systems and institutions immediately, except maybe the penal institution. That's the institution they need to be involved in, at least as prisoners. Right? You can be upset about that. There's no question about that. That's a violation of the law. It's a violation of moral and ethics, too. And if people are having discussions, as I have seen them have, about whether or not that's okay, these are also not principled people. They're not capable of engaging in moral and ethics. That's more people than you think. And that's not a function of education. That's a function of formation, which is a topic for a different video. I want you to give this video a bit of thought, if you could. This is really important. I'm just blown away by this flat world idea that, the BBC misquoted somebody. Are you kidding me? Oh, they forged a document, which, they do all the time, really, but it's for the good. You don't forge things for the good. You don't need to. You don't need to forge the truth. If you need to forge something, it's not true. That's the definition of a forgery. These are problems. If this is confusing to you, you need to be contained somewhere where you can't do a lot of damage. Certainly journalism's not for you. Like, flat out. Maybe presenting is. But doing research and no. That's, you're too unprincipled for that. I'm just going to tell you, that's always been the way of the world. This is why we're having these problems. There's no reason for these problems. This is easy, basic first-order logic to figure out. And we're struggling. Because it's a flat world. And people don't know the difference. And I just scratched the surface. And that was just one example of flat world. The world is hard. Really hard. And it's not an IQ problem. Like, big IQs get the world wrong all the time. See my video about Eric Weinstein and his little talk. I'll link it here at ARC. Unbelievable. Or watch the James Lindsay stuff. I don't think these people are stupid. I don't think they have a low IQ, but they got problems. That's for sure. Like everyone does. Just they're magnified because their profile is magnified. However that happened, for whatever reason, I really don't care. Different topic for a different day, maybe. If you want to see that topic, comment below. But, like, subscribe. We're trying to make the world better. And if people don't understand this in particular this, we're in a lot of trouble. If people think they can work this out on their own, or they're watching people work this out on their own like I was, and those people are like this far off, like they're just not understanding there's a different magnitude to these sorts of problems, we're not going to make it. We're not going to have a culture. We're not going to have a society. You can't even run a family like that. People talk about gaslighting. That's gaslighting large numbers of people. Why isn't that worse? I don't understand. If you're upset about being gaslit by somebody, or somebody attempting to gaslight you, you should be pretty upset about the BBC, which is the news source for everybody who isn't the United States, roughly speaking. There's high crimes and misdemeanors, and then there's that, which is definitely a level above, and nothing's been done, which is even more remarkable to me because we're busy arguing how bad it is. How do you not know how bad it is? Because you're living in a flat world. And not only do you think you might be able to work this out, but you think you're little experts or whatever. Expertise died decades ago. Sorry. You think there are ethicists in the world. That's not a real thing. Sorry. It's just not a real thing. These people are trying to work out ethics with logic, and they're not even capable of doing that. Although you can get close enough, but they can't even manage that. They're still arguing severity in a flat world. They've already broken the law. I should already be in prison. That's not hard, right? That's not hard at all. You broke the law. You go to prison. Goodbye. You don't need a court case for that. It's public. In the old days, they didn't have court cases for that. You didn't go in front of a judge. Everybody saw you do it. You did it publicly. You went into the stocks, or you went to debtor's prison, or whatever it was. They didn't have courts for that. You don't need a court for that. You need a court where you need to find evidence of something, where you suspect something, where there's some question about whether or not you did something. Not where you have emails of people talking about the bad thing that they did and organizing. You don't need courts for that. That's ridiculous. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. Right? And only the lawyers make money there. So I know why they want court for that. I understand that. Also, ethicists? Really? This isn't that hard. But it is hard for a bunch of people. And we need to consider what that means, because that has a significance. That's how flat the world is. We're really stuck on very simple things that aren't hard. They wouldn't have been hard 50 years ago. How do I know that? Just look at history. People would go to jail for that immediately. Goodbye. You're in jail. See you. Right? You can whine about the McCarthy era all you want. Everybody that went in front of the McCarthy hearings was a Russian spy. Every single one of them. And we know that now because we have the documentation from Russia. Oh yeah, they were working with us. You can whine about these things. But back then they weren't wrong. But now they are. And it matters who's running it, who's doing what. And if you have evidence that they're doing bad and you don't speak out, you're in on it. That's not better, but it's worse. Nothing's going to improve if we can't cooperate towards the good. We can't just cooperate with each other because it feels good or because you should cooperate with people. No, you need to cooperate with the good, something higher. You can't do that in the flat world because in the flat world, everyone's equal. So who's bad? Well, no one. We don't live in a flat world. And maybe the only way we can understand the world is a flat world. That's why we need distributed cognition. Because we can't understand the world by ourselves. It will always be flat in some way. We need to cooperate We need to distribute our cognition. We need to get together. And we need to agree on this stuff and take action, more importantly. Because agreement doesn't do anything. You can whine about might not making right and say, oh, force is not right. But in order to enforce right, you need force. If the right thing is to happen, someone has to force it to happen. And when the wrong thing happens, someone has to use force to stop it. Or might. Like, there's no other way. Things happen through action in the world. Think about that. It's really important. And consider that, hopefully you've made it this far, and you can hype this video and let other people know this is an important issue. This is the core key issue, or one of them, of the so-called meaning crisis, of the meta crisis, or whatever they're calling it this week. This is the core key issue, this flat world thinking. But I want to thank you, because at least you've given me your time, energy, and attention.